as the Democratic National Committee convenes. We're very excited to have as part of this week's events the March for Our Lives, which has been organized by the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, and which I think Herman will talk a little bit about, and which Sherry will talk about. And I'll just say a few words to put this sort of in the national perspective, that in this March for Our Lives, we see demonstrated what's going on in Philadelphia about the many people who are struggling to survive, to find a job, to find housing that they can afford, to get an education, to get out of debt, to get health care, the disabled to find adequate treatment and respect. And this fight is going on in the context of a nation in which most people are being thrown under the bus. We have just seen the incredible kabuki theater going on in Cleveland, where we saw this pretense of a party that really represents, I think, what politics looks like when it has been thoroughly hijacked by the top 1%, where it has little to show other than a call for militarism abroad, a police state at home, and that elevates a culture of racism and xenophobia. That's essentially what we saw on display with all of its rather despicable demagoguery. With an entirely white audience, hardly a person in the crowd to be seen at the RNC, after $50 million had been sent by the federal government not to address the critical needs of the people in Cleveland that are very much like the needs all over the country for schools, housing, jobs, but rather to reinforce the state of military occupation represented by the RNC, where you had thousands of additional federal policing agents brought in from the FBI and state troopers and so on, equipped with thousands more units of riot gear, assault rifles, and sniper rifles. You know, this is kind of the America that the RNC would give us. Here at the DNC, we had to fight very hard in order to get a permit for the March for Our Lives. This in particular was the one demonstration that the government of Philadelphia did not want to take place. They refused to permit it until the ACLU took up the case and got the permit. But we will see playing out what the values of the DNC are, which are clearly represented by Hillary Clinton, the candidate of war, Wall Street, and the Walmart economy. We saw a valiant alternative to that agenda in the form of Bernie Sanders' very inspired campaign. And we saw play out here over the last year why it is that we cannot have a revolutionary campaign inside of a counter-revolutionary party like the Democratic Party. And you may be aware of the email scandal that was just revealed yesterday, which is continuing to roll out, where it was announced, or I should say it was revealed in a set of 20,000 emails leaked by WikiLeaks, showing the collusion of the DNC with the press and apparently with the Hillary Clinton campaign in order to smear Bernie Sanders and to basically sabotage his campaign. So what has been known to Greens for a long time about this kind of collusion between the major parties and their favored Wall Street candidates and the corporate press. This is not new to Greens. I think for members of the Sanders campaign, this confirms their worst suspicions that in fact Bernie Sanders was very clearly sabotaged by intent, by backroom collusion between the party, the campaign, and the corporate press. So if ever there was a doubt in the minds of any of Bernie Sanders supporters about what the next step should be, I think this email scandal confirms that that movement will continue to be sabotaged inside of the Democratic Party. It speaks volumes that Bernie Sanders has been relegated to a minor appearance here at the DNC, speaking on a very low-profile Monday evening instead of the night of the nomination. That speaks volumes about the future of Bernie's movement inside the Democratic Party. So I just want to put out there that we have called on Bernie Sanders now to retract his endorsement of Hillary Clinton based on this backstabbing sabotage by the DNC and the Clinton campaign that used very underhanded tactics to essentially stick the knife in to his campaign and assure that the agenda of the Democratic Party would continue to be determined from behind closed doors by the big corporate players who have always called the shots inside the Democratic Party. And what we've seen play out here, come on in, Sherry, welcome. What we've seen play out over the last year is the Democratic Party's usual strategy to fake left, to lift up a principled and inspired progressive campaign, but to destroy it in the back rooms. This isn't the first time it happened with Bernie Sanders. Dennis Kucinich was redistricted by the Democratic Party and essentially silenced, removed from his political career. Howard Dean, who was a peace candidate, was sabotaged by a public relations smear campaign, the Dean Screen, and same for Jesse Jackson. So the bottom line is, the future is not the Democratic Party. The future will be at the March for Our Lives. The future will be at the Power to the People rally. The future will be at the People's Convention, which I've been invited to help keynote, to help for Bernie Sanders supporters, to help give direction to where we should go now. Because we are the only campaign in the race that is not bought and paid for, we do not accept, and therefore we are not corrupted by corporate money, lobbyist money, super PACs, and the rest. So we have the unique liberty in this race to stand up for what we critically need, and you'll hear more about that from Sherry and Herman. But in a nutshell, the American people are clamoring for an emergency jobs program that will also provide an emergency solution to the crisis of climate change. We have an economic crisis and a climate crisis, which I think we are feeling full force today, and this is just a taste of what's to come. This is small potatoes. We have those two crises which we can fix. We call for a Green New Deal, that emergency jobs program, which can actually solve both of these crises right now and eliminate poverty by ensuring that everyone has a good wage job, living wages and up, as part of this emergency mobilization to end the climate crisis. We call for health care as a human right through Medicare for all. We call for education as a human right, for canceling student debt. Like we bailed out the bankers who crashed the economy, we call for bailing out the students who are the victims of that crashed economy from the waste, fraud, and abuse on Wall Street. We call for free public higher education because we have an entire generation of young people who are locked into endless student debt with virtually no way to get out of it in the economy that we have. And we call for a welcoming path to citizenship for the immigrants who have always been the core and at the strength of our economies, our communities, and our culture. And we call for an end to police violence, to mass incarceration and the war on drugs, and finally for a foreign policy based on human rights and international law. When we do all this, you know, we find we actually can have an America and a world that works for all of us. It actually pays for itself by cutting the waste of this dangerous and bloated military budget, and by cutting the waste in our healthcare system, and by cutting the waste of the epidemics of chronic disease that we don't need to have, that are inflicted on us by a sick food system, a sick energy system, and a sick transportation system. The Green New Deal creates a real infrastructure for health that can reduce our healthcare costs 50% or more. This isn't just hypothetical in a study. This actually happened in the country of Cuba when their oil pipeline went down, and they had to convert overnight to clean energy, a healthy food system, and public, largely muscle-powered transportation. So we know this works. We can have an America and a world that works for all of us. And the key is for us to stand up and stand together, to say no to the lesser evil, and to say yes to the greater good, and to stand up and fight for it like our lives depend on it, because in fact they do. Together we have the power to turn this around on a dime. That power is not just in our hopes, it's not just in our dreams. Right here and now, it's in our hands. Thank you. And with that, I will turn it over to